still the deal?
Yeah, that is accurate. Yeah, maintenance team leader at E&J Gallo Winery in the bottling plant in Modesto. I've been joined the company in 2017 after Cal Poly, and I did one of their rotational programs. So I started in Livingston at their harvest facility where they intake all the raw grapes, process wine, and then I did a rotation for a year in the sales business in chain grocery store accounts. So that was super interesting. And then back to the real work in Modesto bottling, where kind of everything comes together to get the wine in the bottle and complete the package and ship it out the door. So we work in a department of 80. We have about 80 mechanics now. And we run 24/7. And I'm currently in charge of the preventative maintenance program. So we have a team of, it kind of ranges, but 15 to 25 mechanics on across over the 24 hours doing preventative work on the lines and rebuilding them and getting them back to healthy conditions, back to production.
Super, Michael. Hey, Michael, just so people are a little bit more familiar with your background and part of your journey. So I mentioned that you were, in this class or sort of an earlier version of this class, and you graduated in industrial technology. You also did your green belt certification. So you're certified Lean Six Sigma green belt from Cal Poly. So
yeah,
it's kind of nice. So you did all this more steam stuff that these guys are working through at this point. So your current position, what's lean about that? So you don't have lean in your title. Do you use lean on a regular basis though in your job? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of lean is very intertwined in the culture here. And I think it's kind of evolving and kind of pushing more towards a lean environment. And so there's lots of processes that are kind of in place now. One of the big things when I first noticed here was the Gemba walks. So we do a 9 a.m. Gemba walk with the operations team to kind of review line performance, review the last 24 hours, safety, quality. We measure in OEE. So I don't know if you guys have covered OEE yet. But we kind of review our metrics for the line, our key performance indicators. We kind of touch base with the team operators, things like that.
So Michael, when you talk about that, I think you might have seen that we were trying to institute sort of a huddle process in the beginning of the class.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still trying to build that out and figure out what that looks like. So when you talk about the gimbal walk, is there is that a huddle, like a moving huddle kind of thing where you're talking on a daily basis?
Yeah, and there's a lot of visual management tools kind of across the facility. So those are very lean in nature. So we huddle in front of this board where there is lots of visual indicators that are referencing safety, quality, performance. And we are huddling with the operations team, who is the kind of operations leadership of the actual equipment operators. It kind of has changed recently, but I guess I'm referencing kind of a little bit of a past practice, but we would huddle with a production engineer and then a maintenance team leader and maybe the maintenance foreman. And maybe someone from quality or maybe from a different department here and there, kind of depending on what's going on, how the performance is going. And then there's an overall 10 a.m. Gimbal walk, and that's more encompassing of the higher leadership. So you have plant managers, senior managers,
right.
People in quality, different departments that are walking through and they're doing these pulse checks. So they're kind of going from line to line across the bottling plant. So they're checking in, reviewing things that are going on in the last 24 hours, just talking about issues that came up, how were they resolved, and things that are kind of still open. And a lot of those Gemba rules apply, like you're not assigning anything, and you can't really assign it or talk about something if they're not there. So it's important that everybody shows up, and So that's very kind of, it's very prominent, you know, it's everybody knows every day, 10 a.m. That's what happens. Everybody's got big headsets on because it's so loud. But yeah, that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me right away coming here to this plant. There was
Yeah.
that was kind of intertwined in the culture already.
Yeah. So we were talking about, organizations trying to get that sort of daily Kaizen in place, so you got people that are trying to do their daily Kaizen, and you're providing a mechanism like these gimbal walks. And I guess in lean daily management, there's almost sort of like a cascaded thing of huddles, right? So the line people meet, and then the supervisors of all the lines meet, and the managers meet or do these gimbal walks in order to get everybody coordinated with the changes and the improvements that need to go on.
Yeah, exactly. The communication is such a big piece in a plant this size. So really getting alignment among different departments is what it takes to get things moving. And it's really it's kind of a part of the culture as well, but the lean approach and problem solving. So we call it the A3 format for problem solving. There's lean practitioner, green belt, black belt kind of avenues that you can go down. So you can sign up for those sorts of classes, and then but using that A3 kind of problem solving and really on the mentality of finding a problem and fixing a problem, which you kind of mentioned at the beginning of the class. And so that's really a big part of the culture, is kind of, just encouraging people to make these improvements, to take the ball and really to try something, even if it's not the right path, just start somewhere and you're going to learn. If you start looking at a problem and you realize it's something else, then you can pivot. But just starting somewhere, I think, is a big thing. And then kind of not chewing off too much, but find a problem, fix a problem, get used to the process, get used to the cycle, get used to who you need to kind of talk to, and then you can kind of go from there. And then once you've established something, once you've maybe implemented a solution, then you can use that PDCA cycle and kind of come back and revise it, the plan, do, check, act cycle. And I think you'll kind of, once you get used to that kind of flow, you'll kind of find yourself doing the PDCA without actually like officially assigning yourself, okay, now I'm going to go do, it's just kind of part of what you do.
Part of what you do. Excellent. That's really good to hear, Mike. I'm glad that's working so well for you and reasonably well, sounds like, for Gallo also. Hey, Michael, I want to remind the students in the class, if they want to ask you a question, they could just pipe up and chat. And we got, Wes sort of watching that and managing it. I'm sure he'll interrupt us if a student question comes in, because that's sort of our priority. But I was just sort of curious, hearing about the gimbal walks and the people that are huddling and talking about this. Do all these folks have lean training per se? So all the students in this class are getting the whole sort of more steam 10-week deal. So they've got a lot of background knowledge, but it sounds like people at Gallo actually have to do this, whether they've taken the classes or not, or how does that work?
Absolutely. I think a lean background will help, as kind of a leg up, when you're interviewing. I think a lot of people have, in-depth experience of these lean processes and systems, but they hire from within. So I think there's exposure there, but definitely not a requirement. But I think you'll find that a lot, it is an attractive quality, and a lot of people do have that kind of coming in to the company. But with even not, they do offer those kind of introductory courses, and you'll see these terms that are just kind of flying around everywhere. Just the flow of work is kind of has the kind of lean flair on things, and from standard work or the way we go about problem solving, or, we talking about OEE and Gemba and just these kind of Kaizen things. You hear these words kind of flying around quite a bit. So I think you're going to pick that up anyway. But I think the interesting point now, and the company side and implementing lean, I think a lot of companies have kind of had this discussion or maybe had this issue, but it's not, we're not building cars. We're not Toyota. And we're not the Japanese culture. We're an American culture, and we're in a processing environment. So sometimes the lean, the traditional lean tools may not directly apply, but the way we go about problem solving absolutely does. So, using these leans to kind of get to the root cause of the problem, focusing on root cause. I really liked how earlier you said, fix the process and not, and leave the people out of it, is really important. And I think that's a big part of the lean culture too. But yeah, so we kind of are finding ourselves, I think, where people use those buzzwords like processes and putting processes in place. And I think you have to be careful a little bit, because you want people to take their own responsibility and be innovative and solve problems and give them the freedom to kind of build those connections across departments and things like that. But then we're also, you kind of get so lean or add so much lean kind of stuff into your mix that may not be lean at the end of the day, because you've ended up creating some red tape, So I think it's important to kind of think, like, is this truly lean? Is this truly the root cause? Like, am I doing, I find myself like with the problem, really, there's so many things that come day to day. It's finding a problem and fixing a problem and implementing a quick thing. Maybe pass down information or communication from shift to shift, maybe some tools like that help, but really just kind of knocking them out, because if there's a problem where you're really focused on, filling out these boxes and making this really beautiful Excel sheet, that could have just taken you 20 hours to do. And the problem was not 20 hours, I also see some things where, the solution is kind of worse than the problem was to begin with. So I think that's something to be conscious of, like if you're implementing a process or you're kind of implementing rules, that may create a behavior. Like, for example, just this last week, we had, we're going through this kind of maintenance initiative, right, that we talked about earlier. But one of the rules that we're doing all these improvements to our storeroom, how we carry spare parts that support the operation. And one of the rules was, we're no longer going to open bearings. So bearings are no longer, it's proven that you can add dirt and dust and rust into this situation, and that can cause problems down the road. But then, somebody brings up, well, if I open a bearing because I need to measure it or I need to look closely, and I can't put it back in the package and I can't return it, that is just going to end up in my locker somewhere or in my toolbox. And so now you've created this other wasteful problem over to the side when you're just trying to, solve like a contamination problem. So it's just kind of something to be conscious of. But anyway,
well, it sounds like something that you need to work some more on. So
Wes, we do have a question in the chat if you want to. So Hannah, do you want to pop on real quick and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for coming, Michael. So I think I heard you correctly. You said you mentioned you worked in a preventative segment with like mechanics. Did you say that?
Yes, that's correct.
So in class, we've been talking about error proofing and like preventative costs and whether they're worth it or not. In your experience, would you say that those preventative measures are worthwhile?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the context that we use that in is really like a repeatable procedure. So if we work on a system of work orders. So if we're going to do a job or assign it, it has to be on a work order. And within that work order has tons of information. There's usually a work procedure along with it. And that's where that standard work piece comes in. And so if you have something that says, inspect the belt. So you're going to inspect the belt of your car, but you really don't, you have, let's say you have 2 years of experience, a good belt might look different to you than someone who has maybe 20 years of experience. Maybe you think it's bad. Maybe the 20-year experienced veteran thinks it's good. Maybe it's the opposite problem because he doesn't really care anymore. You know, but the point is that the error proofing, we can add some actual measurable tools. So it's a black and white decision. Yes, this is bad. No, it's not. Or yes, it's time to replace. Or this is, you know, this is approaching 60% wear and it's time to replace. So I think those are kind of tricky to implement and be consistent, kind of find some good measurement tools that people will actually use. But if any way you can, you know, kind of using, you know, if this is in a range of, you know, if you take off the belt and it has a range of this size, you know, for example, that's stretched by this much, by, you know, a quarter of an inch, or from 3/8 of an inch to a half an inch, you know, so a range like that, I think it can provide some people to some guidelines to work in so they can be confident, yes, this was in that failure range.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Good question.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real trick taking some of that sort of internal or implicit knowledge and trying to make it explicit, right, in some sort of tool or measurement device or methodology that you know takes some of the guesswork out of that. That's a nice thing. I think one of the big enemies of organizations is actually sort of variation, right? And it might be person to person judgment variation that you need to nail down. Sometimes that's really good and you want to benefit from that and know when that happens. But then when it's something that, you know, is maybe detrimental to our organization, you need to know that too.
Yeah, yeah. And there's also lots of other examples kind of in the daily work, you know, maybe not so technical on like a work procedure, but I mean, for your your gas cap example, right? The diesel cap is green, so you have that kind of pokey yoke built into the system where, you know, it kind of immediately notifies you that something's different. So I think a lot of that will kind of help. A lot of our equipment kind of has some rulers and some markings on it, you know, so it's kind of like, hey, this is the setup point right here. This is kind of the sweet spot. So then that, you know, if something moves, you know, if we have to adjust to run a certain material, then at least if we start to have problems, we can kind of go back to that set point. So that's kind of our, you know, it's kind of inherently gets people to the right place faster.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I think unless do we have any more questions? I think we're good to wrap her up at this point. Okay. So Michael, thank you so much for coming by here. I know we've been working a little bit trying to get some reliability engineering training coming here to the Central Coast, and looks like that's going to happen in October. So I appreciate you sort of pointing us in that direction.
Yeah, very exciting.
A place we're a little bit sort of weak as far as the kinds of training we're providing on the Central Coast in support of kind of the work that you're doing now at Gallo. So I'm glad to help and participate with that. Michael, you know, on your way out the door here, you know, we've got all the new, fresh green belts starting out on their lean journey. Is there some sort of parting piece of advice you'd like to give to them before you head on out?
I mean, I always say, you know, don't be afraid to get started. Like I said, kind of finding a problem, fixing a problem, and then going through the tools. I think it's important. I remember doing the project in this class, and some of the tools are going to feel like they may not apply to your situation, to your problem, or they might feel redundant. But I think it's important to go through them, do them as best as you can and learn them. And if they don't apply in the best way, maybe just learn what situation they would apply for. And just kind of learn the tools a little bit better. So if you do come up on a problem, you're like, you can reference back and know that that is in the arsenal, and that's kind of how it applies. And then there's tons and tons of tools, but if you kind of pick the top, you know, the top 10 that the Morse team kind of lays out, I think it'll set you up really well to kind of talk about them in future interviews. You know, talk about this project, give it good examples when you're interviewing of this project, you know. I think that's what people really want to hear is those those really solid examples that show that you have experience and that you've made some progress and kind of solved a problem.
Yeah, even if you don't have to call it lean, right? So,
yep.
All right. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and hope to see you back here in San Luis Obispo and on a visit sometime.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right. So as a goodbye tradition, we're gonna ask everybody to fire up your videos at this point. Give Michael a little sort of goodbye wave. If you're on gallery view, you kind of get a kind of look at the faces that you're affecting, and we'll use this as a way to go on a little 5-minute break. So let's go on a break until, let's see, 5:21.